to Suits and Sneakers, a series featuring sage advice and candid conversations with seasoned leaders from diverse backgrounds and styles. I'm your host, Carrie Tuttle. With my guests, we deep dive into the areas of team engagement, motivation, and effective performance management. Get ready to be inspired and transform your approach to leadership. Please like, subscribe, or follow to be notified when episodes are released. Let's get started. It is my pleasure to talk with Dr. Noelle Seybert today. She is a higher education marketing professional and with a career spanning more than 15 years and including 3 different institutions ranging from religiously affiliated private to R1 public education institutions, she enjoys the rewards and challenges that come with the ever-changing landscape of social media marketing. In her current role at the University of Colorado Boulder, she is charged with managing the strategy and engagement on the main at CU Boulder social media channels. She's happiest in a spreadsheet and brainstorming new ways to communicate with various audiences. Noelle earned her master's in business administration and Bachelor of Arts in broadcast journalism from Point Loma Nazarene University. She went on to complete her doctorate in business with an emphasis on quantitative marketing from George Fox University. She lives in Denver, Colorado, and you can find her at local wine events or reading poolside on a sunny day. Noelle, welcome to Suits and Sneakers.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish it was a little sunnier and warmer here today, but
I know, same here. We're right into fall. So, well, let's start off with maybe on the social media aspect. What do your colleagues misunderstand about what it's like to be in your world?
I'd like to say a lot with respect.
Yeah.
So they respectfully don't understand a lot. And it's so different from being a consumer and then doing it as a business account, and how you need to communicate. It's a little different than how you would write a post for your grandma or your mom when you're trying to market. And actually, at CU, we don't sell widgets, but we do sell diplomas. And so it is a marketing tactic. And how we are always on, I joke that I'm on 25/8. It's not 24/7. It's just always. And so I have my phone that's like an appendage to me. And so I think it's the amount of time it takes and the actual strategy behind it is often lost on those that don't always understand how a social media professional works.
Yeah, for sure. And I noticed like in your bio, you said spreadsheet, and I'm like, a lot of people probably assume that it's a lot of coffee shops and selfies, but there's a lot of data science that goes into what you do. Share a little bit about that part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I am 100% happiest in a spreadsheet. I love looking at the impact and not just, we do chase those trends every once in a while. We'll do that if it fits for us. But it's that ask that everyone's, hey, you need to post this or you need to post that. I can do that, but here's how something similar performed the way you're asking it. Instead, how about we do it this way? And so while the data itself has really informed a lot of our strategy, it also allows me to say no, but like, no, how about? And so sometimes it's just, no, we aren't doing that. But there's other times that it's, hey, I know this is what you want to do and why you're wanting to do it. Let's try it over here and try it this way and see if we can come up with a compromise. And then I track absolutely everything from clicks to engagements to time on page, how deep they went down in a scroll depth, so that we can figure out that giant header image didn't do well. Everybody stopped at 20%. So they got like 2 sentences or they got all the way down. So that article was really sticky. And so knowing that kind of information helps me figure out what platforms and what audiences are responding to what.
Yeah. And I think our audience, depending on their background and what industry they're in, everybody has a little bit of a social media responsibility, I would say, to create awareness, at least, if not having call to action. What advice, you're in the educational space now, but what advice do you give to other leaders who are maybe in other departments about how they can best highlight what they're doing and their successes?
Yeah, the big thing is I find a lot of women especially find it hard to sing our praises and like toot our own horns. Yeah. And there's a delicate balance. I actually just watched a really great LinkedIn learning course around how to sing praises of your team without you're bragging, but you're not bragging. You know the difference. So there's that humbleness to it, but also that advocacy side to it. And that's what I really try to tell a lot when I'm doing trainings, even for colleges and departments around the university, is how can you showcase what you're up to and what your department and what your faculty are doing. For my clients, it's like, what's your team or what your business is doing, that you can also then make it relatable. You don't have to do the like, I went and learned pickleball and here's 5 things I've learned about email marketing. Like that's a little bit too much, but figuring out different ways that you could show, hey, this is what I've been up to. Either, hey, come with me, like come up and learn with me, or just putting it out there and making sure there's a valuable to it. It doesn't need to have a call to action or a click through. It could just be a story, but it's how you're telling that without being like, I'm awesome, even though you probably know you are awesome.
Yeah, and other people should know that too.
Exactly. And how can you do that respectfully?
Exactly. And I think a lot of leaders are hesitant to be really open on social media because they think, well, that's not my job. That's our marketing department's job. But how can they become advocates for and representatives of the company?
Yeah, I think with the hurricane, that's the 2 hurricanes that have just recently happened. There's been a lot of really great CEOs on LinkedIn that have been very transparent. United was one of them, and a few others. I'm a United airline girly, so that's why I know that one. But they did a really great job of explaining what was happening. And the CEO was talking, hey, we don't know certain things. We don't know this. And that was, in my opinion, is huge when a leader shows vulnerability, especially on social and not just to like investor emails that eventually make it to social. And so it's having that human aspect. I like to joke that we need to put the social back in social media, and it's human to human contact is what we're all craving, especially after the pandemic. And how you can do that is just you don't need AI to write everything. You don't need these big words because you've got a big title. Like be very conversational, be human, and also engage back with people that engaged with you. Not everything's going to be beautiful sunshine and rainbows. That not everyone's going to think that what you posted was just so amazing. But people that leave comments, good, bad, and otherwise, really figure out a strategy on how you engage back with them. So it's a push and pull relationship and not just push. Will really help humanize you, the company. If you're posting about what's happening at the company, that's great. If you're sharing other employees rather than just always originating your own, really shows that you are in it and you're with it and talking with the people around you and not just sitting in an ivory tower somewhere.
Yeah. And being really an ambassador, like if you think of, in my world, we talk a lot about sales and how to sell, but it's not someone else's job. It's all of our jobs to sell the company and the solution and what we do for people. So in your world, it sounds like it would be an experience that you're selling as well as a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the fun thing about sale. I've had sales jobs in the past where it was like sales and marketing worked really closely together. And it is very much a people buy from humans. And we hear that all the time. And it's such a cliche, but it's true. So if you are human on social and if people really identify with you, they enjoy it. You're not only just doing memes, you're doing thought pieces with a nice blend of human, then people will remember you. It'll come to that recall, which is what marketers really want, is that top of mind, that recall whenever they're thinking about a certain product or widget, that your company or your widget comes to mind.
Yeah, definitely. We want people singing our jingle.
Yes, I know. Yeah. On the marketer's dream, there's some, like I was watching an Instagram that was like 90s commercials. I'm like, I could sing every single one of these. Like, oh man, they're so powerful.
I know. They're like the jingles of our childhood, right?
Yeah. I'm like the 1-800 general. I'm like, oh my gosh, everybody knows that. Like call 1-800. But yeah.
Yeah. How would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, I really take it from, you have that like from buddy to boss kind of perspective, as everyone's in the trenches, but now you're boss and you're like sitting above them. I don't really agree with that. I don't like that idea of, yes, there's a hierarchy and yes, there's different levels, but we all, especially in social, we work so much and we work all the time on so many different things. It's really important that your team feels valued. And so one of my big things that I do with my team is what are you working on this week? What is your goals for the month? How can I help you? Where's a roadblock? And every week we talk through that. And so my job then becomes advocacy. And so it's really making sure they feel valued, but also that they understand their place in the company and in this giant organization. And so it's really that friendship. And I hesitate to use that because a lot of people will be like, oh, no, typical millennial boss. I think you can do both. And I've successfully done both for my career. And you have that, there is definitely a line in it, but it's that advocacy, value, and really making sure that they have the opportunities they want. And if they can't give them to them at the time, figuring out ways, like around, if a door closes, go through the window. And so it's like figuring out different ways to make sure that they are being growing in what they want, if they want to, not everybody does. And so for me, it's making sure that they are my best employee, but also being trained up to be the best employee at their next location. I would love to have my current staff with me for the next 20 years, but I understand that's not practical. And I really want them to grow and learn and move on, as much as I would hate to lose them. There's bigger and better opportunities potentially. And so I want to help them chase that. And so it's advocacy, value, and just really pouring into what I've learned throughout the years into them. So then hopefully they're the next domino and can do the same when they become leaders.
Yeah, it sounds like you really want the best for them.
Yeah, shocking, but yes. Yeah, I think that's the big thing. So I'm a millennial manager, right? So there's in this weird sandwich generation. So I'm managing up to a generation that speaks a very different language than me, but they're my parents' age. And so I can kind of do that, right? But then I'm also managing down to Gen Z, and let's talk about different languages. Like, whew. So they're very different, and everyone gives them a bad reputation. I'm like, no, they're just different. And so that was my number one thing. I've also worked in higher ed, so I have a little bit of an interesting accessibility to all. Like Gen Alphas are now our current students, and so I got to see them in all different areas. So it's a little probably easier for me than maybe potentially others. But we're sitting here in this weird, Gen X is above me. Some boomers are still around. And then we have Gen Z below with my students are Gen Alpha. And so I'm in that middle range of like, okay, I need to advocate for them, but I need to advocate for me and for my team, but it's not all about me. And so it's that nice, I'm really competitive and love that, but it's that like different balance between all of them. And how do you make that one like happy family because of all the different languages that are being spoken?
Yeah, different language and different motivations. Is that fair to say?
Oh, 100% fair to say. The differences between what motivates a millennial and what motivates a Gen Z, I'm going to say in very gross generalization, couldn't be more different. So I'm not saying that everybody is that way, but it just typically very different. And then the same, what motivates me versus a Gen X, very different as well. And so just different generations and really where we were raised, like regional. And so you bring that into it too, and the age of your parents. I love studying the different generations. There's a book called Generations that's just so good. I highly recommend it to anyone that works with different age groups or wants to understand. They take all these key pieces that happen and then talk about them from every generation. And so you can see how they all impact or view it differently. And so shameless plug on that book.
Yeah, I'm writing it down and I'm totally putting it in the show notes. That's great.
So good. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for that recommendation. What is the difference in motivations from your experience or what you've observed? More on that in a moment. If you're listening to this episode wishing you can get more out of your team alongside other purpose-driven leaders who want to be more effective, I encourage you to take a look at my program, Leading with Engagement. In it, I provide training and a practice field to gain confidence in communicating expectations that help team members stretch themselves and wow your customers. You'll gain a framework for giving meaningful feedback that motivates and inspires them to engage. Among other skills, you'll learn to delegate and track performance to free up your time to lead more strategically. Go to teammojo.ca for more information. Now, back to the episode. What is the difference in motivations from your experience or what you've observed?
So for millennials, we watch Gen X and we work, right? Like we ground and we tried and we climbed and we got there, right? And like, here we are. And now we're sitting and looking around like, why did we do that? So there's just a lot of times where it's just like, wow, like I've been burnt out for 10 years and I didn't realize it. And it became when Gen Z, the one thing I love about them, but gives them a bad reputation, is their boundaries. They understand boundaries impeccably. Like I log in at 8, I leave at 5. That's it. Here's my job description. That's it. And looking at Gen X, typically are like, well, why aren't you trying harder like millennials did? It's like, well, are you gonna pay them? And so they see that boundary. Their mental health is so important to them, and I love that they're championing that, because now millennials who are managing them are like, man, you're right. Like my direct reports have taught me more about boundaries in the last couple of years than in my entire career. And so there's that shift that I think is happening that is counter to what it's been in the workplace. And, you work and work and work and work because that's what you're supposed to do. And you're supposed to climb that ladder and, be the best that you can be. And it was all about working to live and living to work. Sorry, I always get that switched. Whereas Gen Z's like, I just need the paycheck so I can like go to Spain. I found a cheap ticket, like off I go. Like I have PTO. And I appreciate that so much about them. And I love learning that from them. And once you switch that perspective of they're not lazy, they're not this, they're doing what you pay them to do. No one.
And I'm at the tail end of Gen X, and I can tell you some of my colleagues, maybe even myself once in a while, almost wore it as a badge of honor. Like we go above and beyond. We go the extra mile. And it's like, yeah, but to what cost?
Exactly. And it's learning that, my career, I mean, I'm very fortunate to where I am and the access that I have and the job that I love my job. I love what I get to do. But it's like, to what personal costs have I sacrificed for this? And, as someone who's pretty introverted, it's okay that I don't have this like huge group of friends because I don't really want them. But like Gen Zs do, they've got these like giant friend circles and they like travel with strangers and like all of that. And I'm sitting there like, wow, I have more than a month of PTO that's just sitting there. Whereas a couple of my direct reports are up to the like day and they're using it. Like, go for it, man. If you've got it, use it. You could die tomorrow and you didn't take that trip.
That's right. That's right. For sure. So it's interesting to have that different perspective. So the next question sort of along those lines is, when you think of the metrics that you use and the data you use to help make the decisions that you do in your business, are those different depending on generations?
Great question. I don't think the data itself is different. I think it's how you tell its story, how you quantify it. And so it's there. My favorite quote that one of my dissertation chairs said was like, the data never lies, statisticians do. And so, because the data just sits there and then you can interpret it, however it makes you look good. And so giving, just what immediately comes to mind is Asana. So we use that now for project management, and it's relatively new. Some of us have been in there for a year, some have been in for just a couple of months. And that's a project management tool. If you're not familiar with it, you can add all these different labels and types to it. And it's similar to Jira and others. And you can track different projects. And so for me, I use that to see the percentage of task types that we're working on, whether it's exec comms or event or athletic, whatever that might be. If we're creating a lot of content, graphics or video. So then I can have these pie charts that say how much time has been spent. And so when I manage that up, it's like, hey, look at these job descriptions. Do they map correctly to what we've been working on? And when I manage down to my team, it's, hey, look how much time you've done on that. Like, did this fill your cup? Did you like this? And if not, it's, some of the things we aren't going to like in our job. And that's one thing you just have to teach Gen Zs. Like, sometimes jobs suck. Like, there are pieces of it that we just don't like. But then if this piece fills your cup, I'm going to figure out a way to make it so you do that more often. And then next time I pull a report, hopefully there's a more percentage of that. And if I can, less percentage of things you don't like, to help that balance.
And there's so much data that we can use. I love that you're using Asana.
It works perfectly for my brain, my like little logical linear brain. I'm like, I love this so much.
That's great. What are some of the metrics that you measure as far as tracking job performance?
So we don't do billable hours, which is wonderful. I have done that before in agencies, and it's just very stressful, especially for creatives. Like, how do you bill for thinking. It's tough to go back and quantify 15 minutes of thinking. And so job performance for us, we use a different CMS for that. And we've got different goals in there. And so I've tried now this year when we just did our redo for this current fiscal, what are ways that I can use Asana to help power that? And so we've added a different column of what platform this is on. So Facebook, X, LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, Reels, like all of the different ones, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube. How many can we say? And so from there, I can then map that to a goal within Cornerstone. And so it's okay, we spent X amount of time creating content. Great. That maps to your job description. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And so for me, it's all about just being able to like hit report and make it easier than having like anecdotally, I think I spent 20% of my time on that. I'd rather be able to be like, no, look, they're only supposed to do 20% and they did 60. Something is wrong here. And so then I can use it to do their performance evaluations come next June. And then I can also manage it up like something's wonky here.
Right.
We need to figure out if we're wasting time or if asks are coming in we can't say no to, and then figure out how we can do that to make sure performance planning and performance evaluations map to what we expect. Because nobody likes to get into an evaluation and be blindsided. So what can we do to avoid that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and in hiring decisions, right? Like in adjusting job description,
Absolutely.
all of it. Yeah. Makes sense. What mistakes have you seen leaders make with data-driven decision making?
So I'll admit this. I love data and I would rather always trust the data, but sometimes you do need to trust your gut. There is a time and place for that, especially in marketing and especially with humans. We're not ones and zeros. We aren't a computer. We don't operate that way. And so, but there's been times where I look at something, I'm like, no, like we need to do it this way and get pretty, I'm going to do this because I know I've been doing this for 15 years kind of thing. And then it fails. And my direct report will be like, told you, and we have that kind of relationship. And so, or they can push back and be like, what if we tried it this way? Because like, no offense, you're kind of old and I'm more their age. Let's try this. I'm like, okay, let's try it. And it does really well. It's like, wow, that's humbling, And so I hate thinking that I'm like aging out of this, but when you lean into learning other things that people's guts trusted, then you can then add that to your data. And so I've been trying to flip that script of like, there might not be data always available for me, but how can I look at what we're doing and go, okay, so that data will tell me something that I can then add and then use it moving forward. I might not have it now, but I'll get it.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a really good point, because I think for most leaders, as you gain experience, there is some gut instinct that kicks in based on past experiences you've had or past whatever things you've seen.
Yeah.
How do you balance that, the data and the gut?
If I figure it out, I'll let you know. No. It's for someone, I'm a huge strengths finder, Marcus Buckingham strengths finder. I worked for him. I was his marketing director for a few years. And it's just something that I come back to. It's my Bible. I like preach it all the time. Like figure out your strengths, figure out what your weaknesses are your strengths out of control is something that he really drove home. And so for me, I'm significance, competition, activator, maximizer, arranger. So I'm like, let's go. Let's go. Yesterday, I get to Z before most people are at D or E. And so I have to really slow myself down because my gut's saying something and my data is saying something. But I need to allow myself the time and space, or I need to allow others time and space to also process it. So I'm not just bulldozing over people. And that's been a big lesson I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out how, and that's that balance of gut versus data. And when they both come together for me, I'm like, ooh, let's go. But okay, hold on. What else do other people think? And that's being a good leader and not being a manager. It's being a leader and like bringing people along with you, allowing them to voice their opinions too. And so that's a continual lesson that I'm always learning, like having to figure out, because the competition in me a lot of times just wins, but it's taking that step back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to frame it. Like, I think you did a great job there with, and just like, I've heard of Marcus and his work on also like doing what you love. And I think he calls it the red thread, find the red thread. Yeah, I've seen some stuff that he's done. So what What has social media done for your career?
It gave me one. So I started this 15-ish years ago, and I was the young one when Twitter was like, I'm eating a donut. Like we didn't really know what to do with it, and now we don't know what to do with it. It's funny how that came full circle. And so it was, hey, you're the young one. I was working in recruiting for a university, and so they were like, hey, do this. We're supposed to be doing this. Like other universities are doing this. I'm like, okay. So I took it on, and 15 years later, I'm the director at an R1 institution in Colorado. Like it's given me so much. It's also given me a lot of perspective. I was just talking today with my direct report about how neither one of us would want to go back to high school now that there's social media. Like we barely had MySpace when I was in high school, and she's significantly younger, so they also had way more experience with social. But it's given me so much perspective on how people interact and how we're going to respectfully call them keyboard warriors. And so they've also taken a lot from me and the people I've worked for. And so social media gives a lot, but also takes a lot. It's a lot of time, mental strain, emotional toll on some of these bad days, some of the bad, all the things that are happening in the world right now. And so there's a blessing and a curse to social. And I think the biggest thing that I can tell others is to just monitor that, like really check in with yourself. And I have to do that. I have to like turn my phones off and put them away, or I'm just doom scrolling. And we kind of made a joke about doom scrolling over the years. And it's just one of those, I'm like, it's not a joke. Like turn it off, go outside, touch some grass, like get away from it. Because while it can be beautiful and you can find wonderful recipes and great travel, there's also a really dark side to it. And you have to listen to yourself. And as a leader and manager in social media, that is the number one thing I tell my staff. Like when things go down in the world, you need time, please go take it. This is just a job. And we just write tweets. We do more than that, but we're not trying to land on the moon. We're not curing cancer. Like, please take care of yourself.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message. Just the humanity of it. And you mentioned that social, like we're craving social interaction as human beings. And sometimes social media gives us that, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And especially in America, social media has really changed over the last few years. And it's just, there's people that scream into our void. And the biggest thing that I try to do with my staff is like, please don't check the DMs after work hours. Like, just don't. There's really nothing that we can do or should say to a lot of these people. And people just yell and scream or call us names. And I'm like, it's not you. Trust me. Like your skin will get very thick over the years. But then there's a downside to that. My therapist is like, you need to let people in. I'm like, why? Because it's just I've figured out a way to like block myself. Oh yeah, I'm not at work. Like I can be myself. I can be fun. I can have hot pink hair now. So I've like really gotten more comfortable in that and of trying to separate and teaching my staff and teaching others around, like, you don't have to always be on. You are not your job. Like you are not at CU Boulder. Everyone's yelling at us about something else. Like that is not you. It is the institution they are mad at. Like, please don't, it's easier said than done, but don't take it personally.
Right. For leaders who are interested in doing more with social media, what are some sources that you go to for tips or for intelligence on managing social media?
Yeah, I love Social Media Examiner. It's just a really great daily kind of update. They do random tracking of like, hey, Instagram said they're going to release this. You should look here, here, and here. Girl Power Marketing. I know it sounds very silly, but it is wonderful. They always do, I think it's weekly. It might be a couple times a week, like 5 things you need to know that happened in social this week or 10 things that are coming up. And they track the different changes. And if they see or discover or understand the algorithm changes, which seem to be happening every day sometimes. And so it's very colorful marketing. And so it's very thumb stopping content while you're scrolling LinkedIn. You can see it and you're like, oh, I need to read this. And every time I pick something up from it. And I've been doing this for a very long time. So those that are new into it, those are 2 that I would really recommend. And you can just add them to your LinkedIn and then just see them as you scroll.
Yeah. Okay. Those are great sources. Thank you.
Yeah.
What about advice? Like if you were to think back to when you were younger, taking on your first leadership role, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Immediately, I'm like, don't do it. But all jokes aside, it's don't do it with the expectations that I had. And so if I could go back to talk to my years ago self of just, it's not as glamorous. It's not as, climbing the corporate ladder. It's not the Devil Wears Prada. Like, it's not like super wonderful like that. It's a lot of work, a lot of times for not any more pay, and a lot of feedback that you didn't necessarily get before because there's just more attention on you. More people have opinions that they can give you. And so it's understanding it's not about you. And the biggest thing I would love is to go back to my younger self and stop focusing on the bad managers. Lead with that strength mindset of like, don't focus on trying to fix or ignore the weak or not weak, bad. Really look at the leaders that really poured into me, the strong leaders, the women that really mentored me that I didn't realize at the time. Go back and be like, no, like they're really doing, you're going to call back on this in however many years. Really understand that, really soak it in everything you can. And so it's focusing on more on strengths and not what you're bad at. Yeah, don't ignore that, but understand that you can always lean into what you love and do what you love. And so it's that strength mindset and understanding it's about the team success, not just yours. And so that's where I've really poured into my team and what I've learned from a previous manager of just that advocacy that like, you're not going to be with me forever, but I want your next boss to love you too. And so ask the questions, be that advocate, be vulnerable, but also ask and seek that from those that are managing you. Once you're a manager, that doesn't mean you're unmanaged unless you're the CEO. And even at that point, you're probably reporting to a board of directors. So it's figuring out what you can learn from people and not just trying to do it herself by herself. My younger self was very ambitious. I am still ambitious, but I'm more, who can I bring along with me? Who can help me? How can I learn? I don't need to do this on my own. And so I would just tell her that, like, don't give up, but don't try as hard. You can do this.
Well, yeah, that resonates with me because I've really stepped away from this idea of grinding and instead trying to find the flow or trying to find, leveraging strengths instead of, like you said, grinding against weaknesses. So that's great advice.
The grinding culture, like that I just want to like shout from rooftops, like, to what end? Like, when does it end when you die? Like, that's so morbid and just so sad. Like, there's so much more to life. I love going to movies. And so I signed up for AMC A-List, which I can see 3 movies a week. And that used to be something I could never do because I was just working. Now I'm like, I'm out 7:30 to 4:30. I will work on either end of that. And I will work weekends if I need to, but like, I'm going to go see a movie tonight at 5:00. Like, I'm going to walk over there and we're going to do that. And that I couldn't do a couple years ago because I just didn't have that boundary. So learning from those below me, my therapist, she's amazing. And so it's creating those boundaries and living them and not just saying them. And so it's that grind culture and the hustle culture. Like, can we all agree to make that stop? Please.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and you have an amazing energy. So still having that after leading for 20 years shows that you're still doing what you love.
Yes. Yeah. I've stepped away from higher ed twice and come crawling back. And at this point, higher ed's just got me. And so it makes me happy. I'm not working for, one single typically a man, like making him rich. I'm helping, at least in my opinion, helping the future of the world, helping students find the schools that are really good for them, making sure they, find a fit. Might not be CU, it might be CU. And so it's just that access to education. And whatever that looks like to you, that's what I advocate for. I'm a first generation college student. And so I want to make sure that anyone who wants to go, whether it's trade school, whether it's 4-year, 2-year, whatever that might be, culinary school, like, find your path and please run towards it. And whatever that might look like.
Yeah, I love that. So what final words of advice do you have for anybody new to leadership?
It's not a one size fits all. There are a lot of really good books out there, a lot of really good books, but don't read a book or a newsletter or go to a conference and hear someone and think that, oh, I'm going to take everything that person said and force it into where I'm at. Like I mentioned earlier, humans are not computers. We're not ones and zeros. We have emotions, we have feelings, we have a past, we have a future. And so it's taking every little bit and making it yours and not being like, oh, I'm going to do, the Jeff Bezos approach to this. Like, that works for him and his company, but it might not work for you if you're not a multinational multi-billionaire. And so figuring out, what from him you could get and what from, whomever else you find as leaders, and just trying to take in as much information as possible, being that, a webinar or a conference or a book, Also from your people, ask them what they want. One of my favorite things in my yearly evaluations is, how can I be a better manager to you? And never take it personally. Like, tell them to be honest, and no one else will see it but you. It's humbling. And so I love this, and I don't love when you do this. I'm like, dang, didn't know that. Thank you for telling me. And
Yeah.
then I can adapt and change. I'm not changing who I am at my core,
Mm-hmm.
but it's how they want to. And so it's taking a little bit of everything, but making sure it's you and your team and not just someone else's forced on your team. Because I can't imagine that works very often.
No. Yeah. I think, of all the tips out there, yeah, just being yourself is a really key core principle. And then building on that, all of the principles of good leadership as well.
Yeah. Because think about it. When you're like stressed or tired or like under the gun, your real self is going to come out anyway. So wouldn't it be so much easier if you were just always that and then learned and layered on instead of like trying to fake it all the time? And then it drops and people are like, whoa, who's this guy? And so for me, that just sounds exhausting. And so I just have to authentically, the older I get, I'm just, I am me. Hi, nice to meet you. If you don't like it, unfortunate. Hopefully we can still work together, but I'm also just who I am.
Yeah. Noelle, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being on Suits and Sneakers today. I really appreciate everything you shared.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
We're glad you joined us for Suits and Sneakers. If you want to be an expert guest, look for the link in the show notes. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to be notified of future episodes.